In this video from ITFreeTraining, I will be looking at Client Access Licenses for Windows Server 2012, otherwise known as CALs. This video will go through the 3 different CALs available in Windows Server 2012 and which ones you will need to purchase to meet the needs of your organization. Before I go into the different types of CALs, I will first look at what is a CAL. A CAL is a Client Access License and is required by a user or device to access Windows Server. For example, if you had a user that was accessing a file share or using printing services on a Windows Server, this user would require a CAL in order to access that server. This does not include unauthenticated Internet access. For example, if you had a website running on a server and a user was accessing pages on that website anonymously, then a CAL would not be required. It should be pointed out that if you were using a non-Microsoft system to authenticate users before they access the website on the Windows Server, you would need to purchase a CAL for each user or device that is accessing the Windows Server. Depending on how you are accessing Windows Server 2012, there are 3 different types of CALs available. These are User, Device, and Remote Desktop Services CALs. If you are accessing the file server for general use, for example for file and printing-like services, you need to use a User or Device CAL. In a moment we will see the difference between the two. The Remote Desktop Services CAL is only used if you are planning to access the Windows Server using Remote Desktop Services. In a moment, I will cover how it is different from the User or Device CAL license, but first I will have a closer look at the User CAL. A User CAL is bound to a user, and thus they can use it to log into any computer on the network and then access any Windows Server that they wish. In this example, a single user has a desktop and a device which they use to access 2 different servers. Since the same user is using both devices, only one CAL is required. A User CAL is normally used when a single user is using multiple devices. If I add another 2 devices and another user, notice the first user can use the desktop as well as the new user. This means for this network, 2 User CALs are required. User CALs are a good choice when you have more devices than users. But in some cases, this may not be the case. For example, if you have more users than devices, when this occurs, you will want to look at Device CALs. In this example, there are multiple users that are using the same computer or device to access Windows file servers. In this case, if you were to purchase User CALs, you would need 6 User CALs. If you instead use Device CALs, only 3 Device CALs would be required. You can see that in this case, it is cheaper to use Device CALs rather than User CALs. The last type of CAL is Remote Desktop Services CAL. This CAL is also referred to as an additive CAL since it adds features. If you use other software from Microsoft like SQL Server and Exchange, you will need to purchase CALs for that software in order to use its features. Remote Desktop Service CALs are different from User and Device CALs in that they need to be activated before they can be used. Although User and Device CALs are required to access Windows servers, the CALs themselves do not need to be activated and the use of them is not enforced. It is up to the administrator to make sure that they have the required User and Device CALs and thus are compliant. Remote Desktop Services CALs come in 3 different types. They are User, Device, and External Connector. The Remote Desktop Services Device CAL allows a single device to connect to remote desktop services by any user. A Remote Desktop Services User CAL permits only one user using any device to connect up to the remote desktop services. The External Connector is used to access a single remote desktop server by multiple external users. It is used when a company wants to allow a third party, for example, an external contractor that works with your company, to connect to remote desktop services. The last point I want to cover in this video is that new CALs can be used with older operating systems. For this reason, you should always buy the latest OS CALs if you have the choice. For example, if you do not have a single Windows Server 2012 server on your network, there is no reason that you cannot purchase Windows Server 2012 CALs. These will work fine with any edition of Windows Server 2008 or below. However, if you purchase Windows Server 2008 CALs, these would need to be upgraded to Windows Server 2012 CALs before your clients could start accessing Windows Server 2012 installs on your network. This covers the basics of how CALs work in Windows, an important topic to understand to make sure that your network is compliant. If you've enjoyed this video, please feel free to subscribe. All our videos are free and available on YouTube. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next video.